What's going on, folks? This is Mike from Techaholica, and today I'm bringing you my third lesson in my Twitch bot tutorial. If you haven't done so, go check out the first two videos, and what we're working towards is building a slot machine in our chat room. So be sure to check out the first videos if you haven't. Also, there's a setup video showing you how to get your environment set up if you need to do that. Alright, so today we're going to be working with timers mainly, and then that's going to feed into how to create these two aliases for setStats, addStats. We'll talk about that later. Basically, the timers we want to do is kick off timers when people enter the room and stop the timer when they leave the room. Then I'm going to show you some command line tools, commands you can use to mess with timers if you need to, right? So I guess first let's talk about what a timer is. A timer is basically, it's a really powerful tool. It basically says to do something at a certain time for a certain amount of time. So you could say, run this timer in 10 minutes and every second print this to the screen, right? You could do all kinds of cool stuff like that, and there's a lot to do with it, so I'm not going to go into detail about everything, but I'm going to show you how we use it within this script. And then within this script, it's going to be used to say, when a user enters our channel, start a timer just for that user, and after a certain amount of time, give that user a certain amount of money. So default settings that we have from our configuration file, which we talked about last time, is the timer is 10 minutes and the money value is $10. So for a user, after 10 minutes, give that user $10, right? So that's what we want to set up. So let's look and see how that looks. All right, so first thing we need to do, let's look over here, is we need to mess with that on joins. We have a to-do here to start a timer to award money after a certain amount of time. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this here, just an alias called start user timer. So like I mentioned last time, is I like to write my code so that at a high level you can read what's going on, and then have all the messy code and other side functions, right, or side aliases. So the high level you can read and say on join, create a user file and start a user timer, so you know exactly what happens when a user joins. So now we need to set the start user timer. So and this is where we see how the alias works. So I'll just keep adding on to the end. If you haven't noticed, it doesn't really matter where you put your stuff. I think if in the real script, I'd rather have like all the onload and all events at the top, and then all my aliases in the middle, then all my user commands at the bottom. But it doesn't matter where you put your stuff within the script, because it doesn't read the script top to bottom. It has entry points into the script. So the entry point would be onload, so it goes into onload and skips everything else above it, right? So it doesn't really matter where you put your aliases or anything like that. But when you're doing this, for real, you might want to organize it in a way that's easy to find your stuff. So just for this video though, I'm just going to keep adding stuff to the bottom. So here we go. We have a start user timer, which we're calling from over here on join. So on join, do all this, and then start the user timer. And what this is going to do, it's going to create a timer, and it's going to say start. This is a repetition, how many times to run the timer. So it's going to, 0 means run it infinitely. So it's just going to keep running. After how long do I run it? So this is the variable we set in our set variables here, user timer, which is also in the config file, which I think is default to 10 minutes. So it's going to read the value here, which is, we've already read it into the script. So 600 seconds. So run infinitely every 600 seconds, and then everything after that is what do I do. And so I'm going to run this alias called setUserStats. I'm passing in the nickname or the username of the person who started all this, which is the person who joined the channel, right? So join the channel, run this alias, start a timer. The timer is going to be called timer. So this is, we looked at this last time, the string concatenation. Last time it looked a little different. We did it this way. So basically what this says is take everything in here, evaluate all the variables, and put it together into one string. But if you don't use it in that method, you could do this way, which basically says take this, evaluate this, and stick it onto this. So what we're going to get is basically timer Techaholica. So if Techaholica was the person who entered the channel, you would get this timer Techaholica as the timer name. If someone else enters the channel, they have their own special timer, which is by their username called timer, username, whatever the username is, right? And this is how you start timers. You can do all kinds of timers. You can create a timer, test. Then you create another timer test 1. And if you run these with the correct parameters, then you can have these various timers running called test and test 1 and whatever you want, right? So what I want to do, I'm kind of creating a dynamic name for my timers given the username, right? So I'm saying create a timer, which just starts with timer and add on the username to it. So this is the name of the timer, which is timer plus the username, which is, for an example, would be timer Techaholica. Start, run infinitely. 0 means run as many times. User timer, this is the how long to run it, right? So, or after how many seconds to run it. So after 600 seconds, run it and keep running it. And then what am I running? I'm running this. I'm running an alias called setUserStats, and I'm passing in the username. So let's look at setUserStats and what's that going to look like. Alright, so setUserStats is basically just going to call something else, which is, alright, take in the username, take in, pass on these variables to this. Oh, my phone's blowing up. So setUserStats is basically saying, alright, there's an alias we have called setStats, which I'm going to show you in a second, and then pass in these parameters, right? Give it the nickname or the username here, and then cache is just the string cache, so we know what we're updating. And user timer cache reward, which actually should be cache add amount, right? So what we want to do is, there you go. So cache, what we're saying is, pass in the username plus the string cache plus the a money or a number here, in this case the amount of money we want to add for that user. So now let's look at setStats. And the reason I broke it apart this way is because I want to be able to use setStats in different ways. Not always for the timers, right? So I had to break it out so that I could use it for other stuff. So it makes sense here in a second. So here's how setStats looks. It's another alias, and here I give a little description. So I'm saying pass in the username, the property you want to modify, and the increment amount. So this is why I had to break it up, because if I made this thing generic enough so that I could say if a user had a different property, say a user had if you want to give them like a title or whatever, right? So I could say setStats, Techaholica title as the boss, right? So you could do stuff like that, right? So I want to have this generic enough so that it would work for different things. Oh, my cat wants to join me. Come on, buddy. Let's do this tutorial together. All right. So here we go. So going through it all again, we're kicking off a timer. We're saying we're calling setUserStats with the username. This is all this is doing is calling an additional alias saying, all right, we want to set the username here. We want to set the cache value, and you want to change the cache value to be this amount here, which is the cache add amount. And then setStats is really where all the work is going. We've seen this already, the var user file, which is basically, all right, which user property are we going to update? We saw that earlier at the so basically it's this file here, right? We want to update this file. We're saying update this file and update this property for this thing, right? So that's what we're doing. We're updating their cache amount. So this is the user file. We're checking if it exists. And if it does exist, then it's read the property, which is the we're reading the character, which is the section we saw earlier, and then 2, as you can see here, is the property we want to modify. So it's reading the property. In this case, it's cache. Hey, buddy, sit down. Come on. All right. So in this case, we're reading the cache, right? So read the user file and read in the cache value and store it in the property. And then what we're going to do is this calc command is basically saying, all right, I want to do a mathematical equation. I want to do a mathematical equation and store the result of this mathematical equation into this variable here. This is a really cool function that you can use. And remember that whenever you call, so you can see that we have, timer and write ini and all these other methods or functions or commands we're using, and they don't have anything in front of them. So message doesn't have anything in front of it, it's just message. But that's because IRC knows that if it's the first item, the first word in a line, then it's going to be a command, right? But here we're doing a command in the middle of the line, so we need to tell it somehow that this is an actual command. So you have to put that $sign in front of it. If you're doing this like you can also do like this, you know, then you wouldn't need a $sign because it's the first word in the line. But since it's in the middle of the line, make sure you put that $sign on. So that's what that $sign means. So what it's going to do is it's going to run this and return a value. And what we're doing is we're going to take the property, which is the cash amount that they have, and we're going to add on to it 3, which we said here was the increment amount, which is here, right? So we're saying take Techaholica, take its cash value, and add on this amount here. So we're reading in the cash value, we're calculating how much it is after we add it on, we're storing that value in the result, and we're making sure the result is greater than 0. So this is kind of left over from another thing, basically saying that you can't go into negative, you can't go into debt, basically. That's the only reason I have this in here. So we're checking to make sure the result is greater than 0. And if it's not greater than 0, make it 0. And then, come down here and then write to the to the property the result of this calculation. So for this particular instance, what we're saying is for the new user, get that user, and when this timer runs, add $10 to the cash value, and then write that property back to their INI file. So that's how you do it. We've already run over the write INI, and so I'm not going to go into detail again about that. So that's how that works. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm out of the chat room here, as you can see, and I'm going to enter it over here. So on my side monitor, I'm going to enter back into the chat room. So as I mentioned last time that it takes like a minute before this gets updated with the user when they enter and leave the chat. So what I'm going to do is reload this. Oops, I should save it. Load it. Let's reload our slots thing. All right, so now we're running the script with the updated stuff in there, and so that means that whenever my Techaholica account enters this chat, it should kick off a new timer. But what we're going to do in the meantime, so I'm going to keep an eye on that up there. Let's come over here and show you some commands you can do over here, right? So this is your status window, and through here you can enter all kinds of commands. So one main one is just to clear, just to clear out the window. So if you have a lot of stuff in there, errors and whatnot, you can do that. Another one is this timer, which will show you all the timers you have running. So if you had 10 users in here, you run the timer command, you should see 10 timers for timer Techaholica, timer user, timer Joe, timer whatever, right? Say you had timers called like, oh, there you go, see, it just activated. Timer Techaholica just activated because I entered the room. And now if I do the timer command here, you can see that I'm running a timer called Techaholica, 600-second delay, and what it's doing is going to set user stats Techaholica. So this is the command it's running. So there you go. So it's all working fine, just like we want to. You know, I'm not going to wait 10 minutes for the value to write to it, but that's basically how it'll work. But the cool thing is that you could also say you had timers like timer test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4, and you want to see the status of all of them or whatever, you could do timer test star, and star is basically a wildcard. So what it's going to say is show me all timers that match this expression, timer test, with whatever string after that. So if I had like 4 timers there, you would have seen timer test 1, 2, 3, 4 pop up there. Also, it's a good way to turn off all timers, right? So you can say timer and then off, and that'll shut off all the timers. So I'm basically saying for any timer, turn it off, and that's how you turn off a timer, so with that off command. So that's how you do that. So that's really useful. So now my Techaholica timer is no longer running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the channel here, and when he leaves, I'll jump back in to restart off the timer again. So, all right. So the next thing we want to do is talk about this addStats, right? So we looked at setStats, right? So this setStats is being used here by the setUserStats alias, which is being called from start user timer. But I want to be able to use this as well because as an admin, I want to be able to say, all right, give that guy $500, give that guy $200, subtract $100 from that guy, And if you choose to add on to this script later, you might have different properties. So I want to be able to say, change that guy's title, change whatever property you want for each user. So I'm going to create an admin command so that you can say addStats. So there, Techaholica just left. I'm going to real fast just enter back in there. All right. So I'm going to create an alias called addStats, or a command for users called addStats, that any admin will be able to run to modify the properties of users in this chat room, right? So let's look at how that would look. So first thing we gotta do is, as we talked about in the very first video, we talked about the reading in on user commands. So we have a dance command and a dance party. So now we want to add in this one called addStats. So if they do exclamation addStats, what it's going to do is going to say, all right, is the user who's running this, are they an admin in this channel? So if they are an admin in this channel, then you're allowed to move on. If not, you get a message saying, nope, sorry buddy, sneaky, you tried to run it, but you're not an admin. All right, so now what we're going to do is check the properties. We want to make sure that they pass in the correct properties. So we're making sure that they have values that looks like this: addStats, user, property, value. If any one of these guys is null, meaning they didn't pass it in properly, give them an error message saying you didn't run it right. This is how you do it: usage, addStats, user, property, value. And if they do run it correctly, now we can say, okay, now we're going to run the addStats command, which is nothing more than the setStats as we did earlier, right? So it's going to look pretty much like the other set user stats with one minor variation. So now we're going to say, all right, if they say addStats, call the alias addStats, pass in 2, 3, and 4, which is basically the user, property, and value, and pass that to setStats. You can see here that I changed from 1, 2, 3 to 2, 3, 4 because the $1 here is the actual addStats command, right? So it's kind of confusing, but basically we're saying pass in everything that they just typed in to the setStats 1, 2, 3, which is the user, property, amount, and then when this runs, it's going to come back here and say, all right, username has been, or the amount has been added to this property for this user. So it kicks out a little message when you're done saying that so and so's properties have been changed. And we've already looked at setStats and how that works, right? So basically it says username, property, increment amount. So if I want to, let's see how this looks over here. I could say, let's clear out this is a lot of junk. All right, so I'm in this chat room here, right? And on the side window, I'm gonna type in the command addStats Techaholica cash 500. There you go. And so you can see I typed in this command addStats Techaholica cash 500, and then it says, my bot read that and says, okay, well, Techaholica, you have been, $500 has been added to the cache for Techaholica. So it all works just fine. So that's really cool. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Timers are really important. They're really powerful. I hope you get, I'm going to have links onto how to, where you can read up more about timers, because there's a whole lot you can do with them that's really neat. Just for this script, though, I didn't need to utilize all of it. So I will send out some more links on how to read up more about that kind of stuff. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next video. See you guys next time.